As we've already seen in previous videos, when we use the grid of the work with pattern of a transaction, it offers automatic paging. This means that n lines are loaded per page, and through the navigation controls, we can move through the different pages. By default, 10 records per page will be loaded, but we'll see in a moment that it's possible to modify this value. We select the attraction transaction from our travel agency application. If within the pattern section we choose the selection node and see its properties, there's one called rows per page with default value. As we've just said, that default value will be 10. If we want to show a different number, we simply change to custom, and the custom rows property will be enabled to indicate the number of records per page to be shown. Let's see the change at runtime. Now let's see how we can implement paging in a web panel created by us, such as WW Attractions from Scratch that we created for our travel agency application. In the grid properties, we see one called rows. By changing this value, we can change the number of records to show on screen. At that moment, the paging property is enabled, which will give us the option to implement an infinite scroll. Let's see this functionality at runtime. The grid loads the first records, and when you scroll on the grid, or simply move down with the sidebar, it'll load the remaining records until loading all of them. Now we leave the paging property with its default value once again. And we see that only the number of attractions that we entered in the rows property of the grid is shown on this page. Let's suppose that, during the execution of the program, we want to know in which page of the grid we are at each moment. For example, to be able to show the user this information on screen. For this, we declare two variables of numeric type. In one, we'll save the current page, and in the other, we'll save the total number of pages of our grid. In the web layout, we enter the two variables and a couple of text block objects to make clear what we want to show. In the events section, in the start event, we define the variable total number pages, to which we assign the value of the page count property of the grid. This property gives the total number of pages contained in the grid. We did it in the start event, since for this example, we need to obtain this information only once, when the program is executed. And in the refresh event, we define the variable current page number, which will take the value of the current page property of the grid. This property returns the number of the page on which we're currently positioned. We program it in the refresh event, since we must calculate this value every time the page changes. And every time this happens, the refresh event is triggered, so here's a good time to do it. Let's see it at runtime. Now let's see how we can create our own links or navigation buttons in order to customize them to our preferences in terms of design and location. For this example, we enter 4 buttons in the web panel outside the grid, which will be our navigation buttons. And then we configure the associated event for each one of them. We'll use the following 4 grid methods. First page for our first button, which will take us to the first page of records. Previous page for the second one, which will show us the page previous to the one currently selected. Then in the third button, we'll use the next page method, which will return the following set of records. And finally, last page, which will show us the last page of records. Let's see it at runtime. Now suppose that we have a procedure that lists all the attractions in PDF format. For this case, how can we handle a potentially large number of records? We can do it within the forEach command with two clauses that we'll see next, through which we'll be able to control how many and what records to show in the list. We access the attractions report procedure, which lists all the attractions. Let's suppose that, for some reason, we want the first two records not to be shown. That is, to list from the third record we've entered. To this end, we'll use the skip clause, and then enter the number of records to be ignored, in this case, 2. From here, we can also control the number of records we want to show, which will be through the count clause. In this example, the first two attractions will be skipped, and the next 5 will be printed. Instead of numbers, it's certainly more convenient to use variables, whose value may be sent in a parameter or declared directly in the source. For example, suppose we handle pages of 5 records each, and we want only the records of the second page. We could do this by declaring a new variable where we'll enter the page we want to show. And we implement it as follows. For more information and details on this topic, please visit our wiki.